day, one and all. Welcome to episode 19 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. If you're joining me on Spotify, iTunes, or any of the audio platforms, don't forget to click like and subscribe. Or if you're joining me on my YouTube channel, just click that like button and smash that subscriber bell. So this is going to be a little different because I'm going to talk about Vertigo, but not the movie. The movie, which is perhaps Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece and was recently voted by Sight and Sound's once a decade poll as one of the 2 or 3 greatest movies ever made in the history of cinema. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, 1958. If somebody were to ask me, is that your favorite Hitchcock film? No, it's like probably 4th or 5th. It's not as much fun as North by Northwest or Psycho or Rear Window, for that matter. But what I'm going to talk about today is not that, because that would be a whole nother podcast, and I would probably have a guest or two to debate the greatness, not greatness of various Hitchcock films, including Vertigo. I'm going to talk about the medical condition. I hope not that many of you have ever had vertigo, and I don't mean dizziness and throwing up after you maybe drink too much, or if you have a bad reaction to food or some kind of a medication occasionally. I mean waking up in the morning for seemingly no reason and everything is spinning. Remember when we were kids, and maybe even as an adult, if you go to an amusement park, you get on like a tilt-a-whirl, and when it's over, it feels like things aren't going to stop spinning, but they do. When you have vertigo, the sensation of vulnerability, fear, and how that things are just out of control, literally, it's overpowering. And my first experience having vertigo was in the summer of 1996. And doctors told me it was most likely brought upon by trauma, some kind of a traumatic life event. And if I'm being honest here, and that's my goal, to be as transparent as possible, what brought that on, the trauma, was that I had, like a poor sap, fallen in love with the young lady who had become my best friend, and it just wasn't in the cards. And realizing that that situation was going to end with us not continuing to be friends, but it was going to end with us becoming nothing, I guess it was just all too much to bear for poor little Jeremy, age 22. And a few days after the last time we saw each other, woke up one morning and it wasn't this, but whenever I looked down, the sensation was that the floor was coming up to hit me in the face. So that was my trigger. And this is a thing that hopefully you don't learn, but to understand that there are different triggers, there are different head movements that cause certain reactions and other head movements that don't. That particular bout with BPPV, benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, it means there's no other underlying conditions. You're not getting vertigo triggered because you have cancer, or you don't even want to think about that. But that it's triggered by a different process, that it was caused by something else. That particular bout of vertigo, the trigger was looking down. And every time I had to be very, very careful not to go like this, or it was like I was falling off a cliff, would be one way to describe it. But it did appear that the floor was moving towards my face, and that is fucking spooky. That's like, it's not as terrible as feeling like you're on a roller coaster and you can't get off, but it's not fun. Now, I had symptoms. That particular experience, I saw doctors. I felt weak for about a week. It sapped my energy. Whether it was that my brain was trying to correct it, it's all medical stuff beyond me. I'm just talking about the experience and giving you the jargon that I've learned. I first had symptoms late June, and it did not completely resolve itself until after the Yankees won the 1996 World Series. So quite a bit of time, a number of months. Now, the symptoms did ebb, and after the first week, it didn't really affect my daily life very much. My energy returned to normal and all that. But I was not able to look down and not get at any kind of sensation until second week of October. That's something I did not ever want to have again. And I was clear from Vertigo. I did not have another bout, episode, whatever word you want to use to describe it. Did not have another one until 2018. Now, sometimes, as they say, an attack, an episode, a lengthy bout is brought on by trauma. Other times, it's just as simple as you may sleep in a weird position, or you could suffer a concussion. There was a baseball player on the Red Sox named Brock Holt who a number of years ago had suffered a concussion, and then after he was recovered, he got slammed by Vertigo, and it really set him back as far as his career, because think about the timing that you would need as a baseball player and the coordination. Anything that's going to throw you off, can't really play baseball. So this particular time in 2018, I don't recall sleeping in like a weird corkscrew position or having been in any kind of weird where my head was tilted at a funny angle for minutes at a time. I woke up, I was in Florida visiting my mother. I woke up and the room was spinning. It's not obviously really spinning, but it means there's an issue with the connection between the brain and the ear that controls balance. Your brain is confused and thinks you're moving when you are not moving, and it is compensating for that. So it's an illusion of movement. So that particular time of having vertigo in 2018, the symptoms were intense for the first hour or so. And then it started to calm down when I realized there were certain head movements that were good. If I turned my head to the left, nothing. If I looked straight ahead, if I looked up, if I looked down, nothing. If I turned my head to the right, past a certain point, I get the spin. So you learn to live with it. Yes, it's debilitating, but in that kind of a context, at least if you're aware, you have a chance. And so that particular time, the symptoms bothered me for about a week. I didn't see a specialist, I didn't go to a doctor. My ears seemed to be okay, and it resolved itself. I had vertigo 2 more times, not that year, in 2019. First part of 2019, like January, also was not terrible. And then I had it again later that year. Again, before COVID. It was probably in September-ish, but the symptoms also were not as bad as the 2018, which was the worst that I had had it, where there actually was a spinning sensation of varying levels of intensity. So basically, when you would get the spin, the idea is you hold yourself steady. You don't move. You let the spin burn itself out, and it will. You have to trust that it will. This is very important. You don't want to keep moving around. You feel the spin, hold on to something, do whatever it is you have to do, but don't fight it. Don't fight it. Let it go. So the 2019 one, there's actually one little somewhat humorous story from that, which was the main trigger. First was me turning my head to the left, and then that went away. And I realized the only one left, the only remaining trigger, was when I would lay on my back. If I tilted my head up, I didn't exactly get a spin, but I got this weird sensation that I was floating. It's almost indescribable how fucking weird that was. But I would be laying there, and it just felt like, like in a movie, my soul was rising to the ceiling. That's what it felt like. So that was just weird. It wasn't really super unpleasant. So that was September, October of 2019. I closed on this house after an incredible amount of stress. Not trauma, stress. And stress is another thing that theoretically can be a trigger. I closed on the house August 30th, and I had been really run ragged in the previous months, as a whole other podcast of the insanity that took place from May 23rd when I got notice of closing until August 30th. But I had been really put through the ringer. A lot of it was my own fault, but I had really been put through the ringer, and there were a lot of times where I despaired, and the stress, it was overwhelming. And I hadn't been sleeping enough. And the day that I closed on this house, I went to a Springsteen concert in New Jersey that night, and I wasn't getting nearly enough sleep, and everything just kind of, the huge exhalation that things had worked out, it didn't mean that the stress was gone. It just meant that I can breathe again. So 4 or 5 days later, I woke up, I think it was a Friday, and when I opened my eyes, I felt fine, and when I put my feet to the edge of the bed, I was hit with the most intense, terrifying vortex of a spin that I had experienced. Now, as I say, I had not had a vertigo attack in about 4 years at that point. This was the most intense that I had felt. It was so intense that when I closed my eyes, it sounded like wind whooshing in my ears. It sounded as if I was traveling at a high rate of speed, even though I was not moving an inch. Again, using what I had already learned. I was scared, I was angry, and freaked out, but I knew basically what I had to do. Find the triggers, see if you feel any better later today. Do you have to go to the doctor? All that. So I learned that if I moved my head to the right, instant, very intense spin. To the left, I was still getting a spin, but it was a much lighter. It was like it would only last for a couple of seconds. If I tilted my head up, intense spin. So there was the highest percentage of head movements were triggering spins. So I knew this was not going to be 2 days, oh, you're going to be fine. I might have to actually see somebody for this. And in the 2019, the second of the two 2019 experiences with vertigo, I did do a couple of movements with the help of someone that seemed to, even though I didn't complete the movements properly, there are the various maneuvers that you can do on your own. It did enough to kind of lessen the symptoms and get me along the path to wellness and feeling like my normal self. I was still not feeling that great the following day. I woke up and, of course, I went to the gym, and there were times where I was like holding on to equipment. I'm not exaggerating, because you never knew, or I never knew, when I was going to feel this really intense flutter, even if I didn't move my head around. So I decided, because it's very difficult to do the kinds of maneuvers. The main one is called the Epley maneuver, which is a series of maneuvers that's normally performed by a practitioner. But I couldn't do anything on my own intense enough to really make a difference. So I made an appointment to see a specialist, somebody who treats BPPV. This is what they do. And I had an idea of what the treatment was going to be. So I wasn't feeling, I didn't have a spin as intense as that first 20 minutes of horror when I woke up on that Friday morning. By the time I saw the specialist on Monday, I was feeling a little bit better. The triggers were all still there, but they were not as vicious. I wasn't getting the spins as intensely. Like the first morning when I put my head down on the pillow, it was so intense that my sense was that I had to grab the pillow or I was going to fly away. I know it sounds stupid, but that's what it feels like. So I saw the specialist, and you know the phrase, sometimes the cure is worse than the disease? I don't believe that in almost every instance, except for me, this. In order to reset, so basically there are these crystals in the back of your head that help to control balance. And whether through head movements that you're not aware of while sleeping, because it does happen, or as we say, stress, angst, whatever it is, the crystals can sometimes move out of position. And that can trigger vertigo. Now, I should point out, there are people who, no matter what position they sleep in, no matter how many weird head movements, or no matter how much stress or trauma, some people will never have what I've had. It won't. So you don't need to panic. I would say the overwhelming number of people will never have a bout with vertigo out of context. It's not going to happen for you. Some people have experienced it, and they'll all say the same thing. Like when I was at the doctor's office this last time, where I went, and they couldn't really do anything at the doctor's office. They don't do the actual treatments there. But I was standing online, and it was taking a while. There were 5 people behind me. This is a little doctor's office just outside Huntington Village. People are starting to get restless. I can feel it. And you're trying to get this prescription filled for, anti-dizziness medication, which doesn't really work, but they give it to you anyway. And I was not that unsteady, but I was a little bit shaky. And I made sure I turned my head properly. I turned my body so that I wasn't risking that. I turned my body and I put my hand up as if to apologize, and I said, sorry, I got vertigo. When I said that, each of the people online had a reaction to the word. One woman said, oh God, my husband just got over that a few months ago. But everybody had a reaction. They were all older than me, and they had had some experience with it, either themselves, a loved one, or both. And made me feel a little bit better about the fact that it was taking so long, that they all had some experience. Oh, my grandson had it, he was in a car wreck, whatever it was. Everybody had a little bit of a story there. I don't want to, bore you with it. But when I went to see the specialist, she was very, very nice, highly competent. She put me through a series of moves, as we say, the Epley maneuver. And the idea is you are deliberately triggering very intense spins to reset the crystals and be clear of vertigo. So you're in one position for 90 seconds and you're in another one for 30, and it's a whole series of maneuvers which you could look up on YouTube. As I say, the Epley maneuver, there's the Dix Hall pike, there's all these different things that they can do. But she put me through these series of maneuvers, which, if it's done right, and if the person responds in a normal way, resets the crystals and you're fine. Now, many people throw up because of the intensity of the spinning sensation. I did not throw up. And we completed the maneuvers, and then we went through a bunch of other tests, vision and eye movements and all of these other things. So I was deemed okay, and I was sent home. Now, I was a little nauseous, yeah, but the spins were gone. So I went about the rest of my day, and the nausea went away within a half hour. It's not like I was feeling sick all day. Eventually, your body starts to reset a little bit. Felt a little shaky, but I did not have any spins that night. Even she said, you don't need to worry. You can try it. Put your head. No spins. But she did say, I want to see you tomorrow, and we're going to run through a few more moves just to make sure that everything is what my grandpa would say, ipsy-pipsy, everything is good. So I came back the next day, and she showed me a bunch of movements to do to keep it at bay. If you start feeling a little wobbly, do this. Just like preventive measures, like anything else, you take preventive care. She just wanted me to understand that there is preventive care for vertigo. While I was completing the preventive care movements, I got hit with another attack, just as bad as the previous Friday. When I tell you that I was enraged, I was really enraged. If we had just left well enough alone, I was like 30 seconds from leaving, and she said to do one more, boom, like that. So she had to put me through 2 more full Epley maneuvers, which are, quite frankly, they're horrendous. They're barbaric. And that then finally took the spins away. And I have not had, fingers crossed, I haven't had any spins since then. That was like middle September. The treatments definitely traumatized me. I don't want to make too much of it. I'm not crying myself to sleep. I don't mean it like that. But it was so horrible for me that something happened where I began to have difficulty not getting to sleep, because that is something that can happen, that people can start to panic. I was okay getting to sleep, but I kept waking up. I was waking up 3 to 4 times a night, not to go to the bathroom. I mean, just like waking up for no reason, being asleep for 30 minutes, waking up out of breath, like that kind of thing. And I believe that it wasn't a coincidence. It never happened. I have always been the kind of person that once I got to sleep, unless I had to go to the bathroom, sleep straight through. So waking up 3 times, 4 times every night. So then I just had been saying to myself, as this went on from, September, and the fear that the spins are going to come back, I'm still dealing with that right now. There's no defense realistically against it happening again. But what I can tell you is the last 3 weeks, I have not been waking up for no reason during the night. And honestly, and I know I've been doing podcasts and I've been connecting with you all. I haven't talked about this until very recently. I was still moving slower than normal as far as even something as simple as getting into bed. Not just flopping down into bed as I always did. I'm still moving more cautiously. But I'll tell you, 3 weeks ago, as recently as 3 weeks ago, I was still waking up 3 or 4 times every night and just having this just restless sleep, not being able to stay asleep. And I started thinking, this is permanent, pal. You're just going to have to reset. You're going to have to figure out how to survive waking up 4 times every night. Unfortunately, I still have, that's the kind of old remnants of my previous life when everything was negative and nothing good can happen. I started to think, well, you're done. This is it. You're just going to, no. Deep down, I knew it wasn't permanent. You have to kind of try to keep the negative thoughts at bay. Because, hey, anytime we're sick, and in this case, I wasn't sick. I would have had the appearance of someone who was sick, waking up all the time, out of breath, probably feverish some of the time from being like that. But I just needed, and I have read, and I don't like reading of other people's misfortune, but there is literature and there is information on the internet that says when people, without any other medical conditions, when they have vertigo, even when the spins are gone, it can take time, and not a couple of days, but even a couple of months, for the connection to fully repair itself. And for you to say, okay, I can move around again like I always did. I'm not going to just randomly wake up and everything's going to be spinning. But I've said this before, I'll say it again. I would not wish this on my worst enemy. And there are people with what's known as Meniere's disease and who've had what's also called labyrinthitis, way worse than what I've been telling you. What I had was bad. But there are people who deal with this every day of their lives. And that, to me, is another level of horror. So, even with what I just told you, I do consider myself lucky that I had the means to go for treatment. And a doctor and a specialist, because I went to my general practitioner, my regular, primary care physician, and I told her what had happened. She said, you did the right thing. You took the proper steps for your health and your wellness, even if it doesn't feel like it. So she was of the opinion that, from the way that I described it, that these spins, what I was feeling they were intense enough where they may not have gone away on their own as I hoped. That I may have been struggling 3 weeks later, a month later, because she has had patience with that. She always recommended going for treatment. So I got my ears checked. After being cured of spins, I went to the ear doctor, and they checked my eyes. They made sure that everything was working and my hearing was fine. And they basically said, look, there's no guarantee that you're not going to have this again, but you're clear. And I had to keep reminding myself of that. And it can be so helpless when you had this and you still have a sense of movement, that there are things, there are objects and the backdrop and things around you that are moving when they're not. And I had to keep telling myself, nothing is moving. Nothing is moving. And now I'm finally past that, fortunately, luckily, where the worst is long behind me. I'm able to sleep normal, like I'm sleeping to the alarm again, and sometimes I don't even set an alarm. So as always, I'm very, very fortunate and very grateful that things worked out as they did, that I was able to close on this house, as I say, and that's a whole other podcast or two or three, the craziness that took place earlier this year. But I am grateful, and I'm feeling pretty content with, my head feels clearer, literally, figuratively, symbolically, in every way. This is the clearest that my head has felt in, I don't even know how many months, because there's no stress of, oh my God, what's going to go on? Am I going to even get the house, et cetera, et cetera. So for all of you, I hope you never experience this, that none of you ever get vertigo or have to care for a family member who is afflicted by it. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, and I am not kidding when I say that. It's bad, but I was lucky and I did get better eventually. It took a lot longer than I expected, that I would have hoped for, but here we are in the first week of December, and I'm good. So that brings to a close episode 19 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all again for joining me, whether it's on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Don't forget to click the like, subscribe button, but especially if you're enjoying my YouTube videos and you enjoy the content, click that like button and smash that subscriber bell. I will be back with episode 20 real soon. Take care.